Hello and welcome to the second episode of the multiplayer series. In today's episode, we're going to take right from where we left off last time. By the end of this video, you're going to be able to have this accept widget, which pops up when everyone accepts. If no one accepts anything, if the timer runs out, the match fails to start and players must requeue. And if we requeue again, if any one person declines, so player 1 accepts, player 2 accepts, if player 3 declines, everything has to restart. But if everyone now readies up, if everyone clicks on accept, then when the timer goes down, the match has started, as you can see with the print string. And in episode 3, we'll handle what that actually means. But for now, that's what we're going to do in today's episode. Let's get straight into it. Okay, we're going to pick up right from where we left off in the last episode. And last time we finished by just having this, we press J and we, try and ready up for the match. Now we're going to create the match accept widget, which is going to, give a visual option of declining or accepting the match. Let's do that right now then. Let's go to the content drawer, go to our multiplayer folder, make a new folder for UI elements, open this up and search for widget blueprint and call this WBP_accept match. I'm going to go quite quickly through this widget creation because I don't want to waste people's time who are here specifically for multiplayer. If you're struggling with the idea of widgets, let me know in the comments because I'm actually considering making a widget series. Or you can come to my Discord and ask me questions, but I am going to go quite quickly and just speed through this so we can get it done and move back to multiplayer specific things. So I've quickly made it. I've just added a canvas panel with a size box in the middle. The only thing that's really important, this is all just sort of display things, is we have one text, which is our countdown text as a variable. You need at least one text for displaying a countdown, and you need 2 buttons, one for accept or decline. It really doesn't matter what yours looks like. You could literally just have 2 buttons and a timer at the top. Just make sure you've got 2 buttons, an accept and a decline button, and make sure you've got a timer. Very nice. We're now going to go make an interface for the player so that when we accept or decline, we can get a reference to the player controller and fire off an event in the player controller. So let's go to the content drawer, go back to our multiplayer interfaces, make a new interface and blueprint interface, call this int_match player. Open this up. We're going to add 2 functions. They both are just normal functions, no inputs, no outputs. The first one is going to be called client_side_show popup, and the next one is going to be called client_side_remove popup. Now we're going to use these functions to, on the client side, add or remove this widget we just made. It doesn't matter what yours looks like, just make sure you've got accept and a decline button and a timer. Other than that, we're good. We need to go to the player controller and implement this interface. So click on class settings, go to implemented interfaces, search for int_match player. Very nice. Go to interfaces. I'm just going to double click on these to get the functions, and we'll drag these over to the side so we can see them. Very nice. We'll comment this and just call this requesting to join the match. Put a bubble. And this is where we're going to have our logic for showing and removing that pop-up. Very nice. Now, the way we're going to make these functions is quite similar to how we made the last one. You see, on this one, we had to not just have one event, but 2. The J is the first event, and then we have a custom event, and we use the custom event so we can specifically say, are we running on the server or the client or multicast? This time, we are going to execute on owning client. So for both of these, for the client remove and accept pop-up, we're going to make a new custom event. So the first custom event at the top, search for create custom event. I'm going to call this client_show pop-up. Very nice. And I am going to go into the replicate section in the details panel and put this on run on owning client and reliable. We talked about what reliable meant last time. Running on owning client is very important here because every single person is going to show this on their side. The server isn't doing it because the server kind of controls what's going on with everyone. If the server wants to make everyone do something, then that can happen. And widgets are inherently a owning client sort of thing, right? When you request to join the server queue, we execute this on the server because the match game mode is where this function is, and the match game mode's on the server, and you know, we're joining the queue, and that's a very important thing that the whole server needs to know about, so that's very important. But the client show pop-up, that's not really that important in the whole grand scheme of things. You know, if one client has this pop-up shown, the other clients do not care. You know, they need it as well, but you know, they're going to get their own in their own way. We don't need this to run on the server. We only need it to run on each client because it's each client's responsibility for seeing their own widget, and you know, you're only showing it on one screen per person. This isn't going to be replicated in between people, so that's why it's going to be on run on owning client. I'm just going to duplicate that custom event, bring it down here, rename it to client_remove popup. And again, this is going to be run on owning client and reliable because we're only doing this on the client and no one else cares about it. The server doesn't even care if you know, like how this is happening. It's not the server's job. They're going to sort of trigger this, but they're not responsible for handling the actual execution. And we're going to, you know, talk about how that works a little bit later when we set up the server call to this. We need to call these functions, of course. So off of here, search for client side show popup and client side remove popup. We have to make these extra functions. We can't just have whatever logic's here on the interface, because interfaces by themselves, if we click on these functions, there's nothing in the details panel. But on these ones there is. It's because on an interface function you cannot specify where it's running, but you can on a custom event. That's why we make the custom event and call to it. There's a lot of bouncing around places, but it's just so we can specify exactly where we're running it. And to be honest, if you can understand those general concepts, obviously you won't apply it to everything, but if by now you're understanding the sort of reasoning behind why we're running on the server, why we're running on the client, you're doing really well in terms of understanding multiplayer, because that is pretty much the crux of the entire multiplayer tree. There's really not that much to it. It's just sort of knowing where do we have our events, where do we have our variables, why do we have them, and it just kind of builds on that. So it's very important. If you want to know more about that, I've got another video talking about client side versus server side. Link is in the description. But let's move on. Let's implement. What do these functions actually do? Well, the first one that creates the pop-up, we're going to search for create widget. It's going to obviously create a widget. The widget it's creating is our WBP_accept match. Naturally, we're going to promote this to a variable, and we're just going to call this accept match prompt. Before we do the create widget, we're going to bring this variable back, convert it to a validated get, and if it is already valid, we're going to search for remove from parent. Now what this does is it's basically just saying if we already have a valid match prompt, if the player already has a match prompt on their screen, then remove it and make a new one. This stops us accidentally placing hundreds of match prompts over each other. However, I am not expecting this to happen. It probably will not ever be valid. This is just in case, but it won't really happen. And then after we've created the match prompt, we're going to add it to our viewport. Very nice. And then on the client, oh, that was on the remove one. Silly me. Let's just move all of that to the right function. Okay, so this is showing the pop-up on the client show pop-up function. Now on the remove pop-up function, sorry about that, we'll get the match accept prompt converted to a validated get. So if it's valid, if we have a match prompt, we're going to remove it from our parent. That's what the is valid does. It's basically just checking, you know, does this exist? Have we already created a match widget? If we have, remove it. If we haven't, if this is not valid, it means this hasn't fired yet. So there's no point trying to remove something that doesn't exist. We're just going to get errors there. Now we need, I said that weird. Now we need a function on the game mode, which is going to start on the game mode, start on the server, and it's going to come down to all the clients and it's going to trigger these functions. Now, as we said, these run on owning client, which means that, the server doesn't really care about them, but it's still the server who's going to trigger them because it's the server who knows when we've started the match. The server knows we've got enough players, we've triggered the match. Right here you can see with the print string, the server knows we found a match, so the server is going to tell each of the player controllers, you need to do this, you need to show your pop-up. I'm not going to do it for you, right? You've got your functions, I don't care how you do it, I'm triggering this base event you need to handle on your side. On owning client, you need to handle showing the pop-up. Again, it's owning client because each client does it individually. The one person isn't showing the widget for another person. Each person is showing their own widget, so it's on their owning client. Let's make that function now. So let's make a new function and let's call this trigger match start prompt. Compile and save. Actually, instead of prompt, I'm going to call this attempt because we're going to do slightly more than just showing the prompt. We're going to look at that in a second. So here, we want to tell all of our players to show their pop-up. So we're going to get our queued players, which is all of our players. We're going to do a for each loop. So loop through all of our players, and we're simply going to call the interface for client side show pop-up. Very nice. Plug that in, compile and save. Now there is one small detail that I actually forgot to do that we need to go back and add. It was on our match accept. We have this button, so this text for a timer, which is going to tick down from whatever the maximum is to 0 to show how long it is you have to accept. To do that, we need to get the acceptance timer data from the game mode to the player controller. The player controller in itself doesn't know this because they're not the game mode, they're not the referee, right? The game mode is the referee, he knows how long people have, he holds that data, no one else does, but he can pass it to people. To get the data from our game mode to our player controller right here, we first need to, on our accept match widget, add a variable called acceptance time, make this a float, make this instance editable, and expose on spawn. That probably wasn't what you were thinking. My chain of thought kind of went a bit off track there. But what that means now, when we refresh nodes on this, we have acceptance timer. So we can give our acceptance time to our match widget. So we need the data here. We need in this function the data. Now this function comes from here. So in our interface, we're going to pass it to the function. The function is going to pass it to the widget. So let's go to the interface. Client side show pop-up, we need to add an input. Let's just call this acceptance time of type float, compile and save. Now in our top-down controller, in this client show pop-up function, we're going to add an input for the acceptance time. Hopefully this is making sense. This isn't a complicated system really, and it doesn't have much to do with multiplayer, so I'm just trying to go quick through it. We got an error because we need to refresh the node so it pops up. Plug in the acceptance time, plug in the acceptance time, drag like that. There we go. Now we're passing the information through in the match game mode. Now in the acceptance time, plug in the acceptance time. Very nice. We haven't done anything with that yet. We will update that on the widget in a second. But for now, let's just move on. Once our server has looped through all of our players, all of our queued players, and told them to show their pop-up, when it's completed, we need the server to now call another custom event after the acceptance timer delay time, which will check if we can launch the game. We will have waited X amount of time, and then it's time to check if we can launch the game. We will actually make that function now, but we won't, we'll define it, but we won't, really put the actual information there, or we'll declare it rather. So make a custom event and just call this server underscore check. Check if can launch game. Check if can launch game. That's all we need for now. We're going to come back and update that later, but we just need the custom event so we can call to it, because in here on trigger match start, we're going to off completed say set timer by event. The time we're going to delay by is the acceptance timer amount. Looping is false. We're not going to do this. We're going to do it once, not looping. The value is going to be our acceptance timer handle. So we have a reference to the timer. And on the event, we're going to drag off here, say make, or rather create, create event, which means we can now reference any other custom event we've already made. We're going to plug in the function, what do we call it? Check, yes, server check if can launch game. Very nice. We've now set up this trigger match start attempt. The check if can launch game doesn't do anything yet, but we are now telling the clients to show their match pop-up. We now need to implement the function. So we've made this function, but we haven't used it anywhere. So if you tried running now, you wouldn't see anything happen because we haven't actually used it yet. So in our add play to queue, well, we want to do it when our match has been found. When we have everyone readied up, we're going to trigger match start attempt, right? We've got enough people. We know the length of our queued players is equal to our required players. So we know, we've got enough players to start the match. Let's try and tell all of these people to now show that widget that they can accept or decline the match. I made a small little miscalculation. When we have the client show pop-up, make sure you're calling this function. Before, I was just calling client side show pop-up, and when I ran, it was throwing me an infinite loop error because I was calling the same thing over and over again. If you play and you get an infinite loop error, it's because you've called this one again right here, like I did that as well, to be fair. But just correct that small issue, but fixed very quickly. Make sure calling the client show pop-up there. Compile and save. The match game mode is all finished. The top-down controller is all finished like this. Now when we play in 3 people, if I just drag this down so we can see all 3 at the same time, on this one press J, 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 and all of them we can see they are running on their own client. They've been told by the server to do this on their own machine. Show the widget. Right, they've showed the widget. Now, we're not doing anything with the widget, nothing's happening, but, they're all showing their own widget, which is very, very cool. Let's go and add the timer logic for the widget. So go to wbp_accept match. On event construct, we're going to set a timer by event. The timer is going to be every 1 second, and it's going to be looping. We're going to promote the return value to a timer handle called decrease timer handle. And we're also just going to make sure to set the countdown text, which is the text I have put for this little text block right here. It's whatever you have, whatever setup you have. You really don't need to have the same one I have. Just make sure you've got 2 buttons and a text. So get that text, drag off and say set text. And in text is just going to be our acceptance time. So as soon as we construct, we're going to make sure we set the value in that block to whatever the inputted max acceptance time is. And every 1 second, we're going to run this custom event, which is going to decrease the time. So call it decrease time. And what we're going to do is we're going to get our acceptance time, and we are going to decrement the float. So just press double minus there to get this function. It just automatically does subtract by 1. And we're going to say, is it less though? We're going to drag off here and say, is it less than 0? Because if it is less than 0, then we do not want to keep updating. We want to say stop timer. So get the decrease timer handle. Now, if you just say clear and invalidate timer by handle off here, we'll probably get an error because for some reason the engine doesn't like clearing a timer from within the timer itself. This is a function on the timer. So to very easily get around this, we just bring this down here, make a new custom event called, I don't know, let's just call it clear timer. It really doesn't matter. It's just a custom event that we can now call instead of on the true pin. Search for clear timer. It's the exact same thing logically as having this over here, but we make it into a custom event because you can very often, it'll throw you an error saying basically this doesn't work. This is just the engine being weird, let's be real. And on false, so if our timer isn't below 0, then we want to duplicate the text, if it will let me. Duplicate the text down here, plug it onto the false pin. So now we're going to decrease the timer by 1 every second. Let's see how that looks. Press play. Ready up, ready up, ready up. 5, 4, 3, blah, blah, blah. As you can see, the timer is now working very good. It doesn't go below 0. As soon as it hits 0, that's when, you know, the server should now be doing something, but we'll come to that later. Now let's go back to that custom event we had made on the game mode, but we just left this server check if can launch game. So what we're going to do now is this is being called after this acceptance timer delay. We do not need to attempt to synchronize the timer between the widget. You might be thinking, okay, well, the server is spawning in the widget, the server knows the acceptance time, so why doesn't the server update everyone's widgets? And in some cases with the different values that you might have to do that, but here in this specific case, we know if we just give everyone the time is going to decrease by the same amount. We're just using a normal timer, so we don't have to try and sync them. We know they're going to update the same, and if people are having lag where one person's is quicker than the others anyways, that's not going to change if we run it on the server, because if you're lagging, well, that's the difference in time between commands between your client side and the server side, so you would still have that delay anyways. You know, we're still running that on the client. However, this, I keep clicking on the wrong thing. This function is going to run on the server because this guy now, we've waited enough time. Now we're not running on the earning client, we're running on the server because it's the referee. He's rocking up and he's saying, can we start the match? That's a very important decision to make. One person is making it, that one person is the server. So for those reasons, we're going to replicate, run on server, and click on reliable in these little checkboxes down here. And the way we're going to check if we can run the game is we're going to do a branch on the condition. Over here, we're going to get our queued players, and we are going to get the length of our queued players array. Then we are going to get our accepted players array. We're going to get the length of this, and we're going to check, are these equal? Now we haven't yet implemented logic for handling, you know, the accepted players array and updating it. We'll do that very, very shortly. But this is what the logic is going to look like. If, you know, we've waited 5 seconds for the acceptance timer countdown, if the number of people who have accepted the match is the same as the number of people in the lobby, then that means we can start the match. Now, the reason we can't just check, you know, do we have like all of our queued players there, is because some people might quit the match, some people might not accept, and this kind of handles people who haven't accepted, because then if you don't accept, you're not going to be added to the accepted players list, etc, etc. Now off this true and this false pin, this basically means the match has started, and this means the match has not started. It means we've gone to the bottom acceptance timer and we basically need to reset everything and allow people to queue up again. What we're going to do is if someone either has declined or hasn't accepted, they're going to be removed from the lobby and placed back into their own personal UI space. Whereas everyone else is going to stay in the lobby and they can ready up again. We'll handle that in a sec. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, try and make too many things at once. For now, just remember that's what's going on. Off the true pin, we are going to loop through all of our accepted players, or rather all of our queued players, because we know the queued players is the same as the accepted players. So we're going to loop through everyone in the match, and we are going to remove the acceptance pop-up widget. So what was it was called event client side remove pop-up. So client side remove pop-up, we're calling that interface. So now we're removing the widget from everyone's screen, which is really good. And that's all we need to do for now, right here. For now, that's good. On this false pin, we're going to have a function which is going to trigger a requeue. For now, we're not going to handle this. We're just going to make it so we can place it in the right position, trigger requeue on false. So this function is going to handle what do we do if we haven't actually started the match. We're going to make that very shortly, but there's something else we need first, which is a way to reset all of our variables. You know, if we've come to this false pin, it means some people haven't accepted. So we want to reinitialize everything, all these processes, so people can queue up again. But if we add more people to the queue's already full. So we're going to make another function called reset matchmaking variables, which is going to reset some key important things. It's going to reset the queued players. We're not going to do a set, we're just going to drag it in. I'm going to search for clear, which is going to wipe the array clean. It's basically resetting everything. It's clearing the array. We're going to do the same with accepted players. We're going to clear the list of accepted players, and we're going to clear the list of declined players. We haven't updated those yet, but eventually we will decline them. And at this stage, we will have a list of accepted and declined players. We want to clean those, so we're ready to requeue. And in the trigger requeue function, we are going to do a for each loop on our queued players. Whoops, just drag that up there. We are going to remove the pop-up. So we're going to search for client side remove pop-up. We need to do this again because remember, this is firing on the false pin. So yes, we are removing the client side remove pop-up here, but this is firing on the false pin. So if we're requeuing people, we need to, just make sure that we're removing the pop-up because they don't need to see it. They've already tried to accept and someone's declined. So we're resetting everything. And after this completed, we want to reset matchmaking variables with this function. I'm going to get this timer handle and we want to clear and invalidate it, reset everything. So we're ready again to, have the next wave of people accepting. If we now run the game, we can see this working. We can see what it looks like when people decline. So we press J on both of those two, press J again, match found. When this gets to 0 on the countdown, it's going to remove. Very nice. It will have also removed from the other clients as well. Let's just check. Yep, they can't see it anymore. Removed from everyone. Very cool. That's working fine. Now we are going to handle players accepting and declining the match invitation. It's not really an invitation, but you know what I mean. The widget. We need two functions on the game mode. Now we're going to handle this on the game mode. Because when the player tries to accept, we're going to go from the player controller, right? The player controller is basically going to tell the server that they want to accept or decline. Like we did with the request join queue, this is essentially a request to accept or a request to decline, because the server is in charge of who is declining, who is accepting. The server is the referee. I like to think of the server as the referee. It's a great analogy. Like the referee in football, he controls everything, he knows everything, everything goes through the referee because there's one server, there's one game mode, it's on the server. I use the words game mode and server interchangeably, and if you're unsure why that is, they're not exactly the same. However, the game mode only runs on the server. There's only one of them and it only runs on the server. So if we make something on the game mode, it is on the server, and that's why I'm sort of using them interchangeably. So yeah, let's make the player accept function. Hopefully that makes sense. Make a new function, call it player accept. And this needs to take an input of, whoever's trying to accept. It's coming from the player controller. So it's going to take an input of a player controller called player controller reference to the player controller, because the player controller is going to send a reference to themselves over this function. So the game mode knows, what's what, who's who. And we're just going to check, first of all, have we already registered this player as an accepted player? So let's get the accepted players array and drag off and say, not find item, rather contains item. Contains item. This is very similar to what we did in the add player to queue. We check if we've already queued this player, because if we have, we don't want to queue them again. and just close some of these. We don't need the construction, just like viewport, get rid of those. Okay, back in the function. In player accept, we've accepted the player, where we're checking, you know, have we already registered this player as an accepted player? We're going to do a branch off of this contains, because if this is true, if our list of accepted players already has the player we're trying to register, we're just going to return. We don't want to do anything. It's not an error, it's fine, but adding the return just means do literally nothing. So this function, we check and then we do nothing. But if we haven't already registered this player, then we do want to add them to the accepted players. When we say register, I just mean add to the array. So we're adding them, we're registering them to this list of accepted players. There we go. Add some rewrite nodes to make it look a bit better. Compile and save. Very, very nice. Now we just need to make the play decline function. This was quite a simple one. Let's duplicate this function and call this player decline. The reason I duplicated it is we're going to use a couple of these things again, because we do need the player controller reference, right? The player is declining, the player from the player controller is telling the server I have declined, so the server needs to know who has just declined. But of course, instead of checking the accepted players, we need to check the declined players, and then instead of adding them to accepted players, we're adding them to declined players. However, this is not yet done, because if someone has declined, then you know we need to remove them from the accepted players array. You see, when someone accepts, you know, they've accepted, that's fine, we're waiting for something to happen, right? However, if someone declines, that's instantly going to have an effect. In my system, when someone accepts, we're still waiting for everyone else to accept. But if someone declines, they're instantly going to get kicked from the lobby and removed from the list, which is going to have a lot bigger an effect. And we instantly need to redo everything. You know, what's the point in waiting 5 more seconds if someone's already declined? If someone's declined, they don't want to play. So if you're looking for 10 people and you've only got 9 who could possibly accept, we're instantly going to stop that. Otherwise, you know, there's no point running. We're going to do a sequence after here. The sequence is purely to make things look better, but in theory, you could just have them running one after another. And we're just going to do a check, get this player controller over here, the inputted player controller, and we're going to make sure if he's in the accepted player controllers, so branch, find item, wait, so in the accepted players, we're going to find this. Actually, it's not. I did the exact same thing over here, didn't I? It's not find. I don't know why. It just makes me want to say find. Contains item. That is the name of the function we're using. If we are containing the item of accepted players, we're going to remove that person from the accepted players. Remove item. The item we're removing is that inputted player controller. Very nice. And afterwards, on this second pin, drag this down here. We don't want a return node. We just wanted a rewrite node. We're going to call trigger requeue, because if someone's declined, where it's essentially the same as, you know, someone has caused everyone not to go into the match. So we're triggering a whole server-wide requeue where everyone is requeuing. I guess I'm looking at this now and I'm thinking this is redundant. We don't need to do this remove players, I guess, because the trigger requeue resets all of the arrays anyways. But you know, at least we understand the logic of we cannot have in decline players and accepted players at the same time. Very, very nice. And the reason we don't need to do the same in the accept, we don't need to make sure they're not in the decline, because when we check on the server if we can run the match, we don't care about the decline players list. So that's why we don't need to do the same thing in the decline players list. We're nearly done now. We just need a way to interface from the game mode to the player specifically for accepting and declining the match, which very handily is kind of the same thing as we did before. So we'll add a new function and call this client side underscore accept match. add a new function and just call this client side underscore decline match. Very nice. Ooh, little spelling mistake. There we go. Compile and save. Now back in our player controller, we're going to implement those functions. Let's comment this real quick. /remove accept pop-up. Things might get a little bit messy if we don't comment, so good to be consistent. We'll come down here and we will just add in the accept and decline match, and we'll drag them over here so we've got them to work with. Very nice. Drag the decline down here. Now, last time when we triggered an interface, we did it on the owning client, right? When we're spawning in the widget, that is something the client and only the client has to worry about. The other clients don't care when they're spawning the widget. The server doesn't care. Why should they, right? The server can't see the widget and it doesn't need to see the widget. Only the player does. It's not really that important. However, when the player accepts the match, that is very important and the server does need to know about it. So this time, when the player accepts a match, the custom event we make for it is going to be on the server side. So server side underscore accept match, because we definitely 100% want the server, we want the game mode to be updated that the player has accepted or declined. This is important information that the server needs to know about, so we're definitely going to run it on the server and tick it to reliable. Update these in the details panel over on the side. We can call the function over here, server side accept match. Very nice. And down here we're going to search for get game mode. We're going to say get match game mode ref. Match game mode ref. We're going to do an is valid check to make sure it's valid. The only reason I can really think it wouldn't be valid is if for some reason, like when you're loading between worlds, the game mode hasn't yet loaded, but this should pretty much always be valid. We're just doing this to be 100% safe and secure. And then over here, we're going to call player accept, which is the function on the game mode that we just made, and the player controller we're passing through is ourself. Very nice. We're going to now create the decline match. Very similar sort of thing. We can actually just copy this, paste it down here, change the name of this custom event to being server side underscore decline match. Get match game mode ref, Instead of player accept, we're just going to say player decline, and the server is going to handle all of the actual declining of the match. We don't need to do anything. We just need to tell the server this person's declined and call the function over here, server side decline match. Now this hasn't updated to run on server. Nah, it hasn't. As you can see here, when you change if it's like client or something or multicast, you can see underneath the name it'll say execute on all. On server it says execute on server. There's a little visual change, and on this one you can see it just says custom event. Make sure it's definitely on run on server. Compile and save. Very nice. All we need to do now is have a way to call these functions. You know, when are we going to tell the player controller to call decline or accept match, which is a way of telling the server of the game mode afterwards that the player's declined or accepted. Well, that's going to happen in our accept match widget, of course. Like I said earlier, we need two buttons. I don't really care what they look like. It's really not important. This is just to show you the logic. But on accept and on decline, we need to do some stuff. On accept, we need to get the player controller, but we need to get the player controller of, you know, whoever has just spawned into this accept match. So we need to make a new variable and call it player controller ref, of course, of type player controller. There we go. Compile that, save that, make it instance editable and expose on spawn, so that in our top-down controller, whenever we spawn in the accept match widget, we can also pass in the player controller who's spawning it, which is ourself. So now in our accept match widget, we're going to get the play controller ref. We're going to call client side accept match. Very nice. And then on the bottom, we are going to just get our play controller. It's not copying for some reason. There we go. I don't know why the Unreal Engine just started getting a little bit weird with me. It doesn't copy stuff sometimes when I try. Now we're gonna say client side remove pop-up. Just declined. It's not, nope, not remove pop-up. What am I thinking? Decline match. Client side decline match. Very nice. Compile that and save that. This is client side because we're first calling to the client. The widget itself is on the client. Widgets are not replicated. They can't be replicated. A widget is inherently something that is executing on the client. It does not all run on the server. The server does not know, so the widget is going to call something to run on the client because the player controller can then run on the server. The widget cannot go on the server. It has no ability to do that. It is built by the Unreal Engine. It is specifically designed to only run on an existing client, and that's why we'll talk about it a bit later. I think it's like episode 5 or 6 or something when we make the health bar, why it's a bit tricky to make it update. We can do it, and I'll show you how to do it, but it's not as easy as just, you know, changing what it is. Not all the players will see it because it cannot replicate, so that's why it goes to the client side from the accept match widget. But on the player controller runs on the server and the client. The player controller has the ability to call things on the server, so that's why it calls the accept match that is running on the server. Let's add some print strings just so we can test this. Check if can launch game. So on queued players completed, we're going to do a print. I'm doing this on completed so we don't see it run as many times as we have players, otherwise it run 3 times. Let's call this match started. And down here we will, again, it does not want to duplicate. On the trigger requeue, we will say match failed to start, requeue, or rather players must now requeue. Players must now requeue. Compile and save. Let's run this now. So press play. Let me drag this down so you can see all 3 at the same time. I'll make these a little bit bigger as well, just so we can all see it. On my monitor it looks quite big, but I think I've got quite a big monitor, to be honest. We'll press J on the first one, J on the top right one, J on the bottom one. So now 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If we don't accept this, they should all remove. Yep, so no one accepted, so the match failed. If we press J again, accept, 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 now it's going to accept. Match started, very nice. And the final thing to test is okay, so when we reset, when we accepted, so we accepted then, so the match should start, so we can't try again because when the match starts we don't reset the variables. We're going to open into the next world. That's fine because when we open the new world everything gets reset anyways. So to test the final one we have to try again because after we've won it's not gonna. There we go. So J, 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 and decline instantly tells everyone we cannot play the match. Perfect, everything's working fine. Yeah, that's it for today's video. In the next one we're going to start looking at actually traveling between maps and having the main menu widget. But yeah, that's for the next episode. See you then.